What's the biggest challenge in innovation in telecoms? In this week's episode, we sat down with Craig Pemberton from Vodafone at Connected North, discussing innovation within Vodafone, where we are with 5G and 6G, and how the Vodafone 3 merger will unlock investments. On Digitel Talk, we spotlight entrepreneurs, leaders and innovators using digital tech and telecoms to drive global impact in a changing world. Uncovering the unexpected, spotlighting hidden gems, and sharing inspiring stories that shine a light on the most transformative corners of our industry.
Did you know?
Stay tuned to hear about the pioneering work Vodafone has done in mobile. We are at Connected North in Manchester talking about growing the Northern Powerhouse, investment in innovation, fixed and mobile connectivity, and smart cities. Today, my guest is Craig Pemberton, who is a veteran of the telco industry and works as a senior innovation manager within Vodafone. Welcome to the podcast, Craig.
You're very welcome yourself. Thank you, Ian.
Can you briefly introduce yourself and your background in telecoms?
Yeah, so I've been in telecoms for, I think, going on 30 years now. And I started my telecoms career working for a company called Racal Telecom, and progressed onto global telecoms. So I also worked at the now no longer in existence Global Crossing. I think that through various iterations has now become part of the Comcast group. I had a brief stint at a unified communications company in London, providing business services. And then onto what was at the time an Altnet, which was Energous, which subsequently became Cable and Wireless, which subsequently became Vodafone. So it's quite a neat conclusion to that. It's almost a loop, really, because as many people will know, Vodafone was initially started by Racal. So I kind of almost feel like I've come home a little bit there.
You can take the man out of Racal, but you'll never leave Racal or something like that.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It's a very well-respected, British electronics and communications pioneer, Racal. And many people, particularly ex-military people, will have very fond memories of using Racal radios in the past.
Okay, which of course comes back to mission critical, that sort of stuff as well, I guess, which is
could be
part of something we talk about later in our podcast.
Yeah, radio communication.
So, one of the things I think our listeners are interested in is innovation. It's just one of those, sort of ambiguous topics. And for you in the telecoms sector, what's the context that you see and how does it fit in? And do you have any examples, maybe not in your current job, but more, in other parts of the world where, you see innovation and examples of innovation?
Yeah, I think telecoms innovation has created real step changes and kind of ramps for the digital technology generally, actually. So many things that you think of and take for granted, just like the internet is the most obvious example. It will not exist without communications. It is communications. But there's many other things as well. So I remember when IP voice first came about, voice over IP, quite topical, seeing as Skype has recently chosen, Microsoft's closing the Skype service, which was news that just came out in the last week. But that didn't initially revolutionise anybody's day-to-day life. But almost imperceptibly, over the course of time, it's become the default for communications. Everybody uses IP now. That's just how you do it. We're doing it right now. When you go into a modern office, it's quite unusual now if you see telephones on the desk. People use Microsoft Teams. They use WhatsApp on their phone. It's IP voice. Voice over IP has become, by stealth, without anybody really realising it, one of the most revolutionary new technology innovations in today's communications market. And it's happened, and nobody, when that technology first came about many years ago, I think could have envisaged the way in which it will have changed and revolutionised the way everybody communicates now. And I think that's typical of innovation in telecoms. Things sometimes take time to get traction and to bed themselves in, because they often require wide-ranging and sometimes very expensive changes to the network. Sometimes you need to wait until a technology has been written down, until you're no longer wanting to maintain that equipment, that Plessey System X exchange equipment. It's no longer, it's end of life, and you're going to change it to something. And the new technology comes in. And, I think that's the timescales often seem very long, because it's big investments that you're having to make in order to enable those changes. But when they arrive, they're hugely significant. So innovation in telecoms sometimes takes a long time. And often also, I think it's the customers of the services that are the innovators. The technology is a thing that we give them. We bring them something new, a new toy to play with. And our customers decide how they're going to use that, often in unexpected ways. And that's where the real innovation comes in. And it's true, going back, I can think of so many examples of even when somebody decided it was a good idea to put a camera on a mobile phone, and what a crazy idea that seemed at the time. But think of the way that you use cameras on mobile phones. The innovation has come from the customers and from the application developers in the way that they use them. And now, you can't imagine a world in which you don't have a camera or a video camera on a mobile device.
But as you say, changing people's, or indicating at least changing people's behavior. So adoption is an important one. And then scalability, I think, to get the masses or the groups and change of way of behaving, as you're saying about the VoIP aspect of it, that basically you also need to do that. And I know that the actual industry on the mobile side actually sort of shot itself in the foot, because they went and said, oh, let's do 4G and provide lovely IP networks. And then they said, oh, what about voice? And they went, oh, we haven't really thought of that. We better do VoLTE. We better invent something backwards. Even though it was at the time 80% of their revenues were on voice. And of course, it's not the same way now. But that's interesting where the, as you say, technology maybe was head of the industry somewhere in its capability. Yeah.
And it always is. Yeah, I think well, not always, but I think it often is, Ian, that the technology is introduced and sometimes overhyped, and then it hits the market, and the market's just not ready for it yet. And then you've got, Metcalfe's law comes into play. So, the adoption rate dictates the utility of the technology. The more people that use it, the more, Metcalfe's law, right? The more people that use it, the more valuable it becomes. And, that takes a bit of time to bed in. Well, I see this every time a new technology comes along, and it's the same thing with 5G. I know you're going to ask me a question about 5G. But, again, the technology arrives, and the market sort of scratches its head for a bit and does some trials and tests. Doesn't really know how it's going to use it. And part of that is our fault, because we're not, I don't think we do the best at educating our customers and bringing them along that journey sometimes and showing them the benefits of it. Some of it is down to, I think, a bit of skepticism because of the way in which these things are hyped. But also we're reliant on the equipment vendors and application developers and the rest of the market to be on that journey with us.
So that gives us a nice segue into the next question I want to ask you, which is, what does innovation mean within Vodafone?
So very specifically for me, because I'm an innovation manager, I work on an innovation team, okay? And very specifically for me, what it means is taking those new things that we're working on, so there's engineers in different parts of the company and research and development teams, not only in the UK, but all over the world. And we're creating new things. And my job really is to try and pull those, out of the cupboard where they're being worked on by the smart people, and surface that capability into our customer base. And I work specifically with Vodafone UK Business customers. So it's finding ways to use those new things, finding innovative ways to use those new things in a customer scenario. What problems can we solve with this? Or if we were to enable you to do something this way, what value would you see in that? What problems would it fix for your business? How would it enable you to be more sustainable, to make enable your workforce to be safer? How would you unlock new revenue streams from it? How would you become more efficient? So it's being that interface between the customer problem statements and the new technologies that we're developing. But innovation, I don't think it happens to be the name of my role and the name of my team. But it's actually something that I think is a responsibility for everybody that works at Vodafone. Yeah, and we see innovation coming from all kinds of areas. We have a platform internally where anybody that works for Vodafone can submit their ideas. If they have, they can propose that. They can seek sponsorship from areas of the business that are interested in that. So I think it's incumbent on us all to be innovators. It's not just people that have innovation in their job title.
So do you have something like Dragon's Den where you have the executives sitting there and you have certain employees turning up and saying, "Oh, I've got this great idea. What do you think, sir?" And anyway, How do you sort through? And what's the procedure? Because as you say, lots of people in the world, we all have ideas, right? But executing it, market fit, those sort of things are different things. So you mentioned I guess it's a formal process to sort of get people to put in their ideas in this platform. Are they somehow weighted, or does an AI? I guess you might be thinking of an AI to validate whether they've been done before. I don't know. How do you go about sort of deciding? Because obviously there's limited always in these innovation areas, limited resources. What's the best bet? We're going to spend our effort on X, Y, or Z. Is it your inclination? But just be curious a bit how that procedure, that sort of ideation to market fit sort of happens.
It's a digital platform, so anybody can access it. There's a submitted idea, or if you want to go and have a look, and you can search through different ideas that people have submitted. You can see if that resonates with something that you want to do, or a problem that you've got. And if you think that that's something that resonates with you, you can back it. I guess the nature of what's been submitted is going to dictate the route that it takes from there. I mean, that's the thing about innovation, is it's quite difficult to. There's no real handbook or roadmap as to how to do it, because it could be in so many different areas. It could be billing, it could be related to networks, it could be related to unified communication services or something else. So each domain is going to have a slightly different approach to how you innovate within it. For me personally, Ian, we have a strategic direction. So we have things that we know are big bets, things that we know we're going to have to do, things that we've committed to, for example, as part of the proposed merger with Three. So we know things that we've committed to and we'll have to do in order to support that. So whatever I do, whatever projects I'm involved with, have to be aligned to that strategic vision. And ultimately, we're not trying to do things just for the PR. We're trying to create a model and a business case for developing products that are scalable and that will generate sustainable revenues. So you need to bear that in mind as well. And again, that's me speaking from my perspective, because I work in a UK products and propositions team. So my main commitment has to be to doing things which stand the chance of making it into the product factory that we can industrialise and turn into services that we can sell to our customers.
So because of your experience, you're able to sort of identify things which you think are likely to fly or could fly and worth that time and investigation, if I understood it correctly. Maybe, of course, asking your managers and the teams around you whether they also, as you say, you talking about backing it earlier on, backing it yourself, I guess, and trying to support it internally. And are there any projects currently you're, working on, which are sort of in that funnel or in work, something you can share with us?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things which obviously I can't share because commercial sensitivity. But I don't think it'd be a surprise to anybody to know that we've committed as part of the merger with 3 UK with CK Hutchison that we will invest 11 billion in improving our networks and specifically 5G and 5G standalone over the next, I think it's 8 years. So the merger was approved in December. Still a number of things going on there. The ink is, things are still being inked. So I don't think we've announced the sort of formal terms of the merger yet. So some elements of that probably I's being dotted and T's being crossed. But we know that our commitments to the CMA mean that we're going to have to do more and invest more in 5G and 5G standalone. And 5G standalone for me, it's real 5G. Okay, it's not the incremental uplift in speed and improvement in latency that we've had through all of the Gs. But 5G standalone as a core platform for cellular, I think really unlocks a different way of using cellular networks, and that's the key thing. It is enabling customers to take a business use case that previously they may not have considered using cellular for, and now we're able to do it on 5G using 5GSA because we can use features that are new features not available on previous Gs, like slicing, in order to make that realistic and viable to transfer that use case onto cellular.
Are there particular areas of 5G? You mentioned, of course, some features and capabilities, but something in particular that you're pointing to when you say that around, what 5G standalone can deliver is a particular use case or, as I say, capability?
Well, everybody's looking at slicing at the moment, I think. BT have announced the intention to develop slicing products this year. We know that VMO2 have run trials with slicing, and we ourselves, probably been most vocal in terms of sharing with the market the trials that we've done. Started with the Coronation back in 2023 in our collaboration with ITN for network slicing, and we've done a number of different things since then. We supported point of sale systems at Glastonbury last year. Of course, we're a brand sponsor, a brand partner for Glastonbury. And we've done a number of other slicing trials, some of which can be talked about in public and some can't.
Just on a technical level, were those standalone deployments, or is that on a non-standalone architecture?
No, all of those trials have been using 5G standalone as opposed to 5G non-standalone. So the latest version of the 5G core. But, and I think some people do sometimes conflate the terms, and it is a bit confusing, but we're not talking about mobile private networks or non-public networks here. We're talking about 5G standalone on the public radio network. So being accessed through a public mast, as people call it, or a public radio cell site, using the same spectrum that the general public are using. But we're segregating some of the radio resources and some of the resources within the network to provide a kind of pseudo-private experience. So we're protecting that traffic from other users on the network in order to maintain a committed service experience. And it's the kind of thing that you might need if you're transporting, for example, a video stream. And like we're doing a video stream now, and it's working quite well, but we're not doing it at broadcast quality. So if you were looking at 1080p, 24 frames per second with an high quality audio stream as well, then you'd need considerably more than the bandwidth that we're using at the moment. And in order to be able to guarantee that you can get that over a cellular network, you need to be able to protect that traffic against other users, because there might be somebody else within that sector on that cell site that's watching Netflix, or there may be a great number of other users. And Glastonbury and the Coronation are really good examples of that, because there are events where there are massive numbers of consumers using the public network that you are you're kind of almost competing with. So as a business user with a critical service, either business critical, or in some cases maybe even safety critical, if you're going to do that over the cellular network, you want to be sure that you're going to get a certain level of service.
But just you've made me think. I like to think when people are talking. I was thinking of the end user. I presume he has to, if you like, I'm thinking of the core and the core network elements that he has to connect to. Does he actually know that he's on a standalone or not, or is he just authenticating as normal, if you like? I mean, and then the second part of the question is: let's say I am on a standalone. Do I just seamlessly move to if I moved away publicly, would just move across? I'm just curious. I think a lot of people, most likely, including myself, wonder how that user experience and whether it's you were previously saying it's nothing to do with private network, and I'm just wondering how.
Yeah. So one of the characteristics of 5G SA is that it introduces a new method of SIM authentication called SUKI and SUPI, as it's known. It hides the identity of the user so that identity can't be intercepted and cloned on the network. So it improves the security of the cellular network. So this is a new feature which is specific to 5G standalone. So that means that your SIM needs to be enabled. It needs to be provisioned with that authentication method. Your SIM profile has to have that. So you would know. You would know if you'd had that provisioned. On Vodafone, we call for our consumer products and consumer tariffs, we call that 5G Ultra. And you can have 5G Ultra enabled if you have a compatible phone. Not all phones are compatible with 5G SA, but if you have a modern phone that's compatible with it, you can have 5G SA enabled, so you get the benefits of 5G Ultra, including that additional peace of mind through the SIM authentication improvements. So yes, you wouldn't sort of accidentally have it. In the future, it will be the default, no doubt. But whilst Vodafone, EE, and the other networks are still building out their 5G SA footprints, you'll find that as you move around, you'll get 5G SA in certain areas. You won't get it in others. So that's just the nature of the way it works. The modern core networks will support 4G, 5G NSA, and 5G SA connections that dual mode cores or single packet cores.
So would I be right in saying the person, his phone, or let's say the device connects to the network, if this exists, this SUPI, then it will connect that way. If I'm not in that area, it would, let's say, go down a layer, if you like, or the older protocol and try and connect that way. Am I like a stack?
You'll have a 5G non-standalone. Yeah, you'll have a 5G non-standalone connection.
Yeah. So this is a stack of capability, and as you say, this is actually the which also means you need devices, which can also not every device will be able to support this either. So it is. Well, I know that's always been one of the bugbears, particularly around 5G, but not only standalone, but about the devices being available on the market to support these different services.
Yeah. Most people, or certainly consumers, are probably used to like 2-3 year replacement cycle on phones. So we'll fairly soon start to see that most people have actually got devices that have that capability. And there's a fair few in the market at the moment, notably Apple, Samsung being the usual suspects.
And so moving on to, you mentioned earlier on briefly, obviously, we all know it. There's the merger of Three and Vodafone. As you said, I think the ink is still drying as we speak, and the cogs are beginning to turn around that. But how do you think this would affect the innovation capabilities of the joint venture and your job?
Well, so I'm very much hoping that we can get our hands on some of the investment that's been committed to. I say that jokingly. But
how much did you say? Was it 11 billion?
11 billion, yeah.
Well, that a bit small change. You're only asking for the odd billion here or there, aren't you? I mean,
But network development is very expensive, and that's why the merger has been so important for us and for Tree. It gives us the scale that we need to make the investments that we want to make in developing the network, and not having to sort of not two separate companies all trying to do it independently. And the network it's an expensive beast to feed. Because there are lots of things that we want to do that take longer than we want them to take. And the reason it's funding and investment. So the ability to access that is, I think, really going to accelerate our ability to deploy 5G standalone, to densify the radio network. We'll instantly get access to the aggregated capabilities of our closed networks. So we should be able to very quickly see improvements in coverage for everybody, improvements in capacity on the network, and I think that in itself will be the single most significant change. But when I say we look to see some of that investment, we constantly need to be investing in 5G standalone, and then what happens after 5G standalone? How do we bring new capabilities into the network? Edge computing is something that we've been working on for a while. When the market is ready to adopt that at scale, that's going to mean that we'll need to deploy servers into data centers. That's going to take money. That's just an example. Everything takes money here. And having ready access to that money is the most important thing, because you know what the economics are like in telecoms and EBITDAs and what have you. So yeah, I think it's a game changer for us.
Today's episode is sponsored by IFG Consulting Europe, who help operators to tap into technologies to accelerate digitization of the network, drive revenues, and reduce costs by championing promising software providers in telecoms, enterprise, and mobile markets. Go to ifgconsultingeurope.com to find out more.
So what innovations do you see in the pipeline coming down the road?
We've touched on what I prefer to call differentiated service experiences. For me, that's something that I've been focusing on a lot over the last couple of years. I think that we've become, as users of cellular technology, particularly those of us that are fortunate to live in areas where the coverage is very good, I would say rather complacent about the fact that it works. It's always there and it always works and does what we want it to do. But you don't, at the moment, have to go very far away from known centres of population to find that those things that you thought you could do on a cellular device, or maybe not as viable as you thought they were. The signal strength goes down as a consequence of that. The throughputs, the speeds degrade, and now that thing that you did, the application that you accessed, it's not as nice to access anymore. In some cases, it might even stop working. About yourself, you go on a train. Classically, the signal's not very good on a train. That Teams call that you thought you might be able to do because you're used to getting a good experience from Teams when you sat at home, try and do it on a train, not such a good experience. So being able to provide a differentiated, or in most cases, change differentiated for the word elevated service experience on the mobile network makes those things viable. Things that you thought were already viable, but actually in practice, in some cases, maybe not. Now you can confidently do those, and it doesn't matter whether you're sat at home in your, city centre apartments, or whether you're out, living in a more rural area. You get an assured and equivalent service experience. I think it's a real leveler, and it makes the digitisation journey very much smoother for customers, particularly ones like you've got field operations. And you can't always be certain that the network quality is going to be the same everywhere your field operatives are. You can overlay a assured quality of experience over that. Now you don't have to worry about your digitalization journey being impeded by the fact that your engineers can't access their manuals or they can't upload their job sheets or, all of those things that they can normally do when they're in an area of good coverage.
Well, I think an interesting point you make also related is on the digitalization, which I think we as operators, people in the telco space, but of course other industries are dependent on that, are really trying to, or are having to rely as they move to full digitalization. I'm thinking of one of the areas I've come across recently in a personal experience is checkout, where, obviously you can imagine there's some sort of country fair where people are selling goods and you need to get coverage there so that they can actually, use their digital wallets to check out. But I was actually at a local place the other day. It was actually someone just buying an ice cream, and it was actually a public building, if you like. But I noticed myself that on my mobile the signal was bad, which is only indicative. And of course, she was trying to check out with her credit card with her mobile, just tapping. And the system backend was not able to somehow connect or authenticate. And this lady was getting quite upset that she wasn't able to pay, and the staff on the other side of the desk were getting upset because there hadn't been a good reuse experience. But it hits people very quickly. And I think digitalization, it is that ubiquitous. Before we think of things like more advanced services like drones flying around, it needs to be ubiquitous. It needs to be, coverage needs to be there. Otherwise, the service is only partial and not reliable. So I think you've pointed out some interesting points around how important it is to a differentiated service, i.e., people hopefully being also prepared to be able to monetize and realize the value, and not every service has the same value or importance.
Yeah, it's a really good example, and I'll give you another one. I'm lucky enough to, you depending on your views of electric vehicles, your opinion might differ, but I'm lucky enough to have an electric vehicle. I know they're not for everybody. But if you do have an electric vehicle, you may have experienced the frustration of standing next to an EV charging station, public EV charging station, and realising that you haven't got the right app on your phone in order to be able to access it. And trying to download the app on your phone, but finding that you're unable to do it because you either haven't got a network connection at all, or the network connection is so slow, it's taking an age. And that sort of thing. The digitalisation experience needs to be seamless. Otherwise, it just results in frustration. People won't use it again. So that sort of touch point with digital technology needs to feel, really like it should just work, to coin the Apple phrase. It should just work. And when it doesn't just work, then people get really frustrated and they don't want to go and do it again. And having good quality assured network connectivity is a fundamental part of that.
And where do you feel we are on the sort of delivery curve for 5G? The reason why I say it, you maybe know Dean Bubley.
Yes.
Apologise if I pronounced it correctly or wrongly. But I think he's quite well known as in the industry. And he was on a podcast recently. He said only about 30% of the 5G standard has actually been implemented.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of people that have, came up with different elements that they wanted in the standard, but for IP protection reasons, but basically they're not deliverable or economic. Do you feel there's a long way to go with 5G yet? I mean, you mentioned standalone and advanced. Maybe you can share with me a bit more what way you think advanced might do for us. And then, of course, got our friend, which is about to be standardized, I believe, 6G. So do you think these are enhancements that are going to help us, or in what way?
Well, I think Dean might actually have made this point, or a very similar one, on one of his previous blog posts, which I'm completely agree with. And Dean's often quite critical of the telecoms industry as a whole, and in a bit of a fun tongue-in-cheek way sometimes. But one point that he does make is and this has come up in Connected North, actually, in one of the forums. and it was the journey to 6G for him, funnily enough. And we discussed whether it was actually useful having this kind of categorized 4G, 5G, 6G kind of nomenclature, because actually the way 3GPP, which is the standards body, responsible for creating the standards that the vendors and other parts of the ecosystem implement improvements in cellular technology. It's a continuum. It's almost a continuum. So it goes according to releases, right? So release 17, release 18, release 19. At some point, somebody decides we're going to call this a new G. But actually, not all of the features that have been specified in those releases is universally adopted by vendors and telecoms operators, and the ones which are adopted, it might be different from in each market. You know, we might have enabled a certain feature in the UK but not in Germany, or something might be available in Singapore that's not available in Lithuania. So it's actually very much a kind of buffet of which features you want to implement. You know, when you call something 5G or 6G, it's kind of almost an arbitrary thing. And actually, sometimes I think it's really driven by the need to try and sell something new and shiny to the customer. And I'd rather think in terms of, you know, what capability does this bring you, which you can get utility from, regardless of whether it's a 5G, you know, ostensibly a 5G feature or a 6G feature or whatever. And actually, if you've got a problem that 4G can solve, then why do we need to give you something and call it 5G? You know, if it's simply 100 Mbps throughput, it's going to solve your business problem, and you can achieve that with a 4G connection, then that's fine. And you shouldn't feel as though you're in any way behind the curve because you've not got the latest and greatest G. So I don't think it's super useful. I think we've got a long way to go within the envelope of what people currently refer to as 5G. But there are many features that haven't been implemented widely. Slicing, as we talked about, is one of those. We've got things like RedCap, which is an IoT capability. And there are several other things within the 3GPP specifications as they currently stand that haven't yet been adopted on the network. So long way to go there. 6G, people want to talk about. But the truth is that those standards are still being developed. We're still several years off, I think, even doing meaningful trials for 6G. There are ideas around what 6G is going to be, but I think the things are still very much up for discussion at the moment. So I think it's too early to sort of say. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done under the heading of 5G. It's not really to have to worry about 6G too much anymore. That's my personal view.
Does your job go into that towards 6G in that sense that you're asked as to, within the company, what's
customers want to talk about it? Yeah, customers want to talk about it. Yeah, they absolutely do. But as I said earlier on, we have R&D teams. We have elsewhere in the business, we've got really bright people who are working on these standards. And my job really is to interpret customer need into what those teams are developing. And it's, as I say, it's kind of too early really to be able to do trials and tests with customers for 6G. It doesn't exist yet, so that's not something that I'm focusing on at the moment. Come and ask me the same question in a couple of years' time. I suspect the answer will be different. But I think right now there's so much to be done within what we've got to work with right now. It's realistic, it's deliverable. It can make real improvements to customer experience. We should be focusing on how we get that right, first and foremost, with an eye on what's coming down the track later, of course, but that's not my primary concern. I'll let I'll let the real product people worry about that one.
Yeah, the one service I've heard in the 6G world, which I think sounds quite different to what we've been able to do so far, is sensing. And I'm interested where that will take us. But we can park that for now, as you're saying. We can maybe come back to in a few years' time. But one of the things I also, partially where this podcast came from, was, how we can use telco for good. And in that sense, do you see any advancements or any projects where SDG targets can be achieved using our telco capability, and they're worth promoting and talking about?
I mean, there's a great many. So Vodafone on Vodacom in Africa, I think set the standard when it comes to how you use technology and telecommunications to improve people's lives with the launch of M-Pesa. And M-Pesa has revolutionised the way people move money around in some of those African countries using a mobile phone. If you don't know about M-Pesa, look it up. It's such an uplifting story. It's an amazing innovation. It's a really simple thing to do as well. Actually, complicated behind the scenes, but simple to understand.
Isn't it supposed to be one of the largest use of applications in the world, or largest use?
Something like that. I mean, it's crazy, and it's empowering, people to be able to transact, to pay for things, to send money to friends and relatives in a really safe and simple way. I think so. I think that's the gold standard. But in terms of other things that we can do, IoT is a real enabler for sustainability. We've seen so there's a project which has been publicised, so I can talk a little bit about it. Called Constellation, which is with UK Power Networks. Vodafone has been a partner in that project, and that has been a trial for smart substations. So the way that we use energy and move energy around, not money now, but the way that we move energy around is going to have to change. We need to use less of it. We need to be more innovative in the way we input generated energy into the grid and we extract energy from the grid. An example of that could be micro-generation, people with solar PV panels on their roof putting energy back into the grid, or even vehicle-to-grid technologies where you're sort of storing energy in your electric vehicle battery and then paying that back into the grids during times of higher demand. All of that kind of thing means that we need to be able to use the grid in a much smarter way. We need to be able to monitor in real time what's going on. We need to be able to control the grid in a much smarter way, to be able to move that energy around and store it effectively and generate it at the right time. Use renewables in the most efficient way. Telecommunications technology really enables that, because the IoT capability of being able to put the right kind of connectivity into a substation, electricity substation, or a wind farm, or a hydro plant, or even somebody's home battery or home solar PV, is key. All of this needs to be controlled, and you can't control what you don't have visibility of. So that's where IoT and sensing becomes a really important component in making that viable. So I think that's really exciting. I think there's a great sustainability story there. I think the use of EVs and the increasing use of EVs and the need for charging stations, again, as per my anecdote earlier on, is really enabled by having the right kind of connectivity into those locations. I don't think that there's so many different applications for public good, for better communications, from mission critical push to talk, to keep people safe at festivals, to making sure that the toilets at Glastonbury are emptied so that it's a nice experience for people using the toilet and using.
Have you got personal experience there, or
not at Glastonbury? But yes, I think everybody's has experienced a less than 100% clean facility in the past. And it just the potential for making our lives better in so many ways, I think is one of the reasons why I was attracted to telecommunications in the first place, really, because it touches on so many areas and it underpins on so many things. And if we're not communicating effectively, then we're not operating effectively, are we? And that cuts across everything from social, environmental, right through to is my business profitable? And everything is down to good, reliable communication, in my view.
Related to that last point about communication, it just reminded me back to COVID, actually. Think of how the networks coped so well, given that suddenly everyone was working from, well, everyone, a lot of people were fortunate enough, I'd say, to work from home. Other people, of course, still had to sort of still go out there. But fundamentally, the networks pretty well coped with that. And, it's changed, I think, the dynamic, how people are working now. I certainly see that in my daily life, that, I can be on a call morning with someone in Australia and then in the evening in the US type of thing. This is from the UK's perspective, let's say. And it's seamless. And that sort of capability wasn't around that long ago. I mean, it's quite recent that it's done so seamlessly, let's say, and without much problem.
It's certainly motivated, I think, the drive to improve broadband, and particularly fibre broadband in the UK. And of course, COVID was when the example you gave, working from home, it certainly put probably an unexpected load on the broadband networks and the OSPs. Now, again, as we've seen at Connected North, and there was a rather fabulous keynote from Zen Internet that likens the altnet scene in the UK to kind of wacky races. There's so many businesses now putting fibre into homes and on business premises. It's almost like it's almost like the early 2000s again, and that's great. The competition is like super healthy, and there will probably be consolidation within that industry as tends to happen. But I think it really peps up the industry when you see a big change like that, and it kind of wakes up the open reaches and the Virgin Medias, and to some extent the city fibres as well, to realise that there are other people doing this also, and the end result for us as consumers, I'm a consumer as well. The end result is we all get a better service, we get a faster connection, we get more choice of operators and how we want broadband services delivered to our homes, and that's a good thing.
Okay, that's absolutely, totally agree with you. One last question: we'd like to give people an opportunity to give a shout out to either someone in their working lives. It could also be private lives, which they really think worth celebrating or giving a high five to, let's say.
I would really like to celebrate a guy called Rowan Chesler. Rowan works in our team, looking into his R&D and innovation within Vodafone Group. If you'd have seen the video that we released just after Christmas, actually, I think it was at the end of January, you'll have seen Rowan making the first direct-to-device, satellite-to-phone call within the UK on the Vodafone network, and he made that call to our CEO, Margarita. And Rowan has really been really the driving force behind that project. And again, you will have seen the partnership between Vodafone and AST Space Mobile, whose satellite constellation enabled that call. I think that's a really revolutionary technology, and I think that Rowan's really been living and breathing that project for a long time, and deserves the credit, for for sitting and making the call on a wet Monday, January evening, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. So, shout out to Rowan and shout out to his team for bringing that technology to life for us.
It also sounds a bit like an adventure.
Yes.
It wasn't, as you say, because it's new frontiers being achieved with it. And so it's not just a technological evolution, but also an adventure, and which requires people to have the vision and sticking at it, right? Otherwise, you can't make it. So that's an excellent shout out. Appreciate that. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the podcast and part of the Digital Talk community. And I'd like to wish you all the best for the future. And maybe, as you say, in 2 years' time, we can reconvene and see whether any of what was said today comes true, particularly direction 6G. Obviously keen to also see what innovations Vodafone brings to the market and which ones that you've had a hand in. So thanks again.
Yeah, and it's great to meet you and Connected North again, Ian. And I hope we meet again soon. Take care.
Did you know?
First UK mobile call. Vodafone made history when Michael Harrison, son of Vodafone's first chairman, made the UK's first mobile phone call at midnight on the 1st of January 1985. He called his father from London's Parliament Square using a Vodafone transportable VT1, a device weighing around 11 pounds 5 kilos, with just 30 minutes of talk time. Despite the background noise of New Year revelers, the call was crystal clear. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and rate us. You can also find us on LinkedIn, and we're keen to hear from you regarding topics you want covered in the future. Thanks for listening and stay tuned.